All right, who's ready for the Love Story podcast? Just kidding. It is the Birth Story podcast, but there's such an incredible love story that's shared today as part of our visibility series with Amy, Kate, and Steph. And they walk us through their fertility journey, their love story, all of the intricacies of being a same-sex assigned at birth couple and getting married and being together for 20 years and then starting a family. And so I hope you learn a lot about their fertility journey, their great birth story, which involves some hypertension / preeclampsia and an induction, and all around really great affirming education on some of the injustices that are going on in the world with same-sex couples. So let's get to it. What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does a day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Hides. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them and you deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this birth story family. Before we get started, I would love to have you guys in Birth Story Academy. It is premier childbirth education for your hospital birth, no matter what the birth looks like that you're planning. So medicated, unmedicated, a wait and see attitude, a belly birth, an induction, there is a module for all of it. And I have a blank name tag at your seat waiting to put your name on it. And the best part about Birth Story Academy is that I get to be your virtual doula. You go into my private Facebook group where I interact with you every single week and cheer you on as you plan and prepare for the birth that you want, no matter what that looks like. So I hope you will go to birthstory.com and enroll in Birth Story Academy today. Hey guys, welcome to the Birth Story podcast. How's it going?
Hey,
Good. Thank you for having us.
I'm really excited to be talking with Amy, Kate, and Steph today, who are a couple that were the same sex assigned at birth. And we are in this visibility series. So this is the third interview in the visibility series, just really talking to the audience, you guys, about the journey of fertility, the laws in the different states, like the injustices and the inequities of the things that we see in the birth room. And today we're going to get into like your love story and your fertility journey and your birth and then the postpartum period. So thank you for being here. Let's start at the beginning. All right. Who wants to go first? We just want to hear from you. Amy, Kate, who are you?
Okay. I am a native New Englander. I'm from New Hampshire. I am the oldest of 5 kids, raised Southern Baptist evangelical. And now in my 40s.
That's a whole podcast.
It's a good, yeah, we can unpack that later. So now I am 40 and, but now we've been in North Carolina for the last 2 years. We came here for work. Absolutely love Charlotte and the Charlotte area. And I would stay here for a long time if I could, but I'm going to get dragged back to the Arctic inevitably.
Oh, Steph, tell us about you.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Massachusetts. I was not raised in a religious household. I was raised in a family where my folks said when you were of a certain age and you felt and you learned enough about all of the various religions, and if you like any of them, you can pick one and do as you wish. I'm a creative director. I'm also a musician, so my time is often spent hanging out with really cool creative people and trying to kind of herd them all together to make awesome things and put them out into the world for various clients or music and different musical endeavors and whatnot. I'm also 40. I just had my 40th birthday, and I think I got some arm pain along with that, some serious tennis elbow happening as a gift from the powers that be, that, when you turn old and you instantly get like new aches and pains and gray hairs and things. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Well, there is this thing that happens right after you have a baby too. And it's when we hold the babies, we haven't used these. This is like a real thing that parents experience with the hand and the elbow and the arm and the wrist. Like, there's a term for it, and I don't remember what it is. I'll have to Google it before I publish this episode. But this is like a thing. It's like called the new parent arm. It's like the new parent arm or the new parent hand.
This is the arm in which I hold our child like every second that I'm holding her.
Yeah. So that
could be it.
I think it is it. I don't think it's being 40.
I mean, you definitely don't play tennis, so
yeah. But I'm like on the computer a lot, and I play guitar, and, so
very rarely do I interview couples that are the exact same age. Isn't that interesting?
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Steph's 6 months younger than me.
Yeah.
But we're the same age for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So before we dig backwards, tell us about new parenthood. How old is your child? And because I just alluded to the fact that you are holding a baby.
She is what, 5.5 months now?
Yeah, she's 5.5 months.
Yeah.
She's wild. It's a super, super fun age, I'm finding, because she's just like starting to have intentional feelings about things, intentional reaction. She's laughing constantly, and her little belly laugh is just the greatest thing in the whole world.
So cute.
In the last couple of days, she figured out how to support herself when she's sitting up using her arms, so she doesn't just topple over like a weeble. She kind of gets the tripod thing going on. It's a blast. The first few months were tough, to be honest, but it's just getting more fun every day.
Yeah. It's been pretty great. She's so cute, and just like, I don't know, she reacts to us and giggles or cries. She notices now when we leave the room. And that's been like kind of hard, like a little bit of guilt there from like, she sees us. I come downstairs because we have a nanny in our house and helping us out. And I'll go get coffee. The baby will see me and then start crying. And then I have like parental guilt or whatever. But it's so cute, and I love like waking up next to her every morning. It's the cutest things. Like it's totally like a blessing.
I love it. Okay, well, I have a couple of questions. And waking up next to her, are you guys doing co-sleeping?
Yeah. Little bit. She's mostly in the, what's that thing called? Bassinet?
She's in a bedside bassinet.
Yeah.
But for her last wake up, like in the morning for her very last feeding, when she wakes anywhere between like, I don't know, 4:30 and 6, we'll pull her out at that point, and she sleeps between us until like 7, just till we kind of wake up. So that's kind of a little special time. So Steph would have co-slept, I think, full on from the beginning if I would have let her, but I'm like so scared of it. I don't even really sleep when she's between us. I'm just like constantly making sure there's no pillows, but it's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Until she smacks you in the face, which she does. Like, she thinks it's funny now. And if she wakes up before us, she'll just start whacking us in the face.
Wait till she crawls up and tries to like nurse on your nose. And you're like, wrong body part, girl. Yeah. Okay. So her name's Iuis. How'd you guys come up with that name?
It's actually Amy's grandmother's name is Irene. And we wanted her grandmother passed away a few years ago. And we kind of just wanted to keep her memory and the name alive, keep it in the family. But Irene is kind of an old lady name.
Well, don't get me wrong, there are lots of young, beautiful people named Irene. But yeah, we were going to give it to her as a middle name. And then one day we thought of the nickname Iuis. I don't remember how. Yeah. And as soon as we said like, Iuis is a cute nickname for Irene, we were like, that's it, it's happening. And my grandmother passed away from Alzheimer's, and I lived with my parents. I moved back in with my parents to help care for her the last years of her life. So she's just incredibly special to me, a beautiful person. So to be able to memorialize her in this way is just magic. So that's our Ivy girl.
What a legacy name. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I am really excited to hear your whole birth story. But before we get into that, I mean, there's a long journey to getting pregnant when you are in love with someone and married to someone who has the same sex assigned to you, right? And it's not as easy as egg and sperm, which isn't always an easy journey, but So I want to hear about how you guys got together and your love story. And then I want to dig really deep for the audience to hear. Like, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about a fertility journey because there's so many different routes and what you chose was right for you. So how in the world did you meet? How did you fall in love? This is my favorite. I could just have this should be the love story podcast.
You need another podcast,
Yes.
Heidi. I don't think you have enough going on.
Yes.
So we actually have known each other for probably, I don't know, going on 20 years now or a little less, but we met through mutual friends. So actually our partners at the time met. And then so like we all met together. We each had partners at the time and they knew each other. Then we all hung out. And funny enough, we broke up with those partners and both of us happened to stay best friends with those two people. So those two people are still in our lives now. 20 years later, they're like our best friends in the world. And so through the years at this person's events and parties, I would see Steph and we would just be like, oh, hey, what's up? Like super casual, just kind of stop and chats. And that was it. And then back in 2016, that friend invited me and my partner to a 4th of July gathering at the lake and also invited Steph and her partner. We just sat down and started having a conversation and it just hit different. It hit different. And I should say that like, so the whole time prior to that, Steph mentioned earlier that she's a musician and she plays in like metal bands and stuff. And I'm like, the least, like the farthest thing from a metal person that you could ever imagine. Like, so I think I just didn't see really us as having things in common. So I never just paid much attention. And then we just sat down that day and started talking and we were talking. I didn't even know she did anything outside of music. And lo and behold, she's just like this brilliant person with this really interesting career. And she's super passionate. And like, I was just totally captivated by her. And when I left that day, I actually said to my partner in the car, like, wow, I never realized Steph's kind of hot. And then I couldn't get her out of my head after that.
But you were
and then,
in a relationship.
Yes. And both of us were pretty unhappy. And we were just kind of like doing that thing where you're really trying to make it work with someone, And so the mutual friend in the middle kind of picked up on the fact that we were like digging on each other. And then she just started, and was also simultaneously also the ear for both of us who were always venting our relationship problems. So eventually she was like, you guys are so dumb. Like, why don't you just get out of these relationships and be together? And mind you, she and I are not talking at all. This is like just behind the scenes. We're both kind of like, anyway, so it took about 6 months and our relationships ended and we did not talk to each other prior to ending our relationship. So we were good, really good about that. And,
but did you stalk each other on social media?
Yeah, so bad.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was kind of like the tell, like how I knew something was going on. Like at least that there was like maybe some sort of like interest from Amy. Cause every time I'd post on Instagram, it would be like, doot, and her little screen name would say that she liked my photo or whatnot, or hearted it. And then I was like, oh, but we had been friends previously on Facebook and like way back in the day in MySpace. So like, it was like, whatever. But then I started noticing like more and more of that to the point where I was like, every time I post, Amy likes it. And I started liking hers also. So we just started, I guess there was more like going on between our two profiles. And then eventually I slid into her DMs.
Yeah. And I had broken up with my partner like the week before. And so I was like, this is so perfect. And I remember the first message and the like butterflies I had. I was so excited.
But like, Steph, did you know she had broken up? Did you know that like they were broken up? Like, did your relationship status change on social media?
No. So it was like during the time where we had that moment together at the beach that day and we talked a bit. After that, like, I had been wanting to reach out because I had broken up with my partner. And then I wanted to reach out, but I couldn't tell, like, she's not very active on Facebook and all, or social media, or wasn't around then. So I couldn't tell. And I had written her like the same text a bunch of times and deleted it, being like, if you're no longer with this person, would you be interested in like getting a drink together? And then I just chickened out for like, I don't know, 6 months and kept deleting the text and never sent it. And then eventually I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna, because we had talked about actually doing like YouTubing and setting up YouTube channels and podcasts and things like that day at the beach. And I was really legitimately curious if she ever went down the road of doing that, because I was wanting to do it for myself and was going to ask her some advice. So that's how was what I asked her about in her DM. So it wasn't about dating, it was about anything at all. And then from there, we just started chatting back and forth. It took us like
3 days or 24 hours or something to start flirting on there though. And then then we went in.
Yeah.
I love it. Flirting on DMs.
Yeah.
Welcome to the new world. So this was over a decade that you guys knew each other before you had this moment at the beach. I mean, that's a long
18
time.
Years, maybe something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty, it's, and now that where we are in life, I mean, it's kind of astonishing to us when we think about it, to how happy we are and how beautiful our life is, that it was really sitting in front of us the whole time, you know, and we're both going through these like terrible relationships and just, you know, the grind that we all go through trying to find your love. And like, there she was the whole time.
Yeah. So crazy. It makes me wonder right now, who am I not thinking about? Right? Like,
just sometimes a matter
right there. Right. Yeah. At your fingertips. So, okay. So you're doing the DM thing. Did you guys take it slow or did you go real fast?
Kind of a mix of both. So I think the one thing that was interesting, at least on my end with Amy, is that things felt very natural, like right out of the gate. And I intentionally wanted to have some time to be single and have some time to like date other people and figure myself out. And because I was coming out of a relationship and she was as well. So I think we both were at times trying to put the brakes on here and there. But then like next thing I knew, we were like doing face masks together, like on a random Wednesday night. And that's like something you do well into a relationship.
Or she'd be like, well, you want to come over tonight? And I wouldn't go home for like 4 days. And then I'd go home for 2 days and go back for another 4. And it was a little bit tumultuous in that time because I'm much more like monogamous, serial monogamous, like real bad. I don't do like dating more than one person at a time. I'm terrible at it. So Steph, it was confusing to me because we would have these times where it just felt like we were totally together. And then she would need that like 2 days to go sow her oats or whatever she was doing. And we went through it that summer, kind of trying to give her that space and stuff. But it was about a summer from like Memorial Day until then I think it was in early October or November that we like made it Facebook official. And then I basically moved in.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So when did you decide that you wanted to get married and like have a family together? Like, so it's one thing to be like dating and doing face masks and whatever. It's another thing to be like, let's spend the rest of our lives together. So when did you guys start having those conversations?
I think for me, like I knew pretty early that Amy felt different from like any other relationship that it had up to that point. And I was that feeling, in addition to how comfortable it was, in addition to like how beautiful she is, I was like, yo, I got to lock this down before she wakes up someday and looks at me and is like, who's this fool? So it was maybe like, I don't even know, 6 months to 8 months into the relationship where I was starting to have those thoughts.
Official relationship.
Yeah.
Not counting like the summer part.
Okay.
And so for me, it was about that time. And I don't know, I feel like we've always been pretty open out of the gate about marriage, about children, like in having those conversations, just because we're like getting old and time is a ticking. So
it was this thing we had in common, I think, you know, and in like I said, our mutual best friend, it was one of the things she said, like, you guys want the same things. Like, so we knew just from common life goals that as humans wanted to be married and be parents at some point. So, I mean, like I was 37 or 8 at 37 at the time or something like that, 36, we're late 30s. So we also had that, like, there's no point in waiting around. So,
yeah. Or not being super forthcoming with what your needs are, and what your wants are. So I'm assuming right away you're talking about parenthood and becoming parents. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the conversations I didn't have to have in my own relationship was like, who would carry this baby? Are we going to adopt, So did you guys start having those conversations like right away? Like, did you both want to carry the babies, or did one of you, like, how did you guys navigate those conversations to make sure that what you both wanted aligned with being together?
I always knew I wanted to carry. Like, I've just always wanted to be a mom since I was born. Pretty typical, or fairly typical, experience. And for Stephanie, it was a little bit more, it changes. It has changed a lot over the course of things. So in the beginning, we had this agreement that I would carry the first one and she would carry the second one. But as she started to explore her own gender identity, that's kind of shifted. And then even after our birth experience, those feelings shift again. So it's really interesting. But in the beginning, we kind of I think we just kind of started with me, and then figured we'd take it one step at a time after that.
Yeah. And I've always, like, in a world where it's challenging to do this when you are the, same assigned sex at birth, like, there's a lot more hurdles to go through and things to think about. But I've always, even if I didn't want to carry and deliver, I've always wanted to be like, well, let's use my egg. Maybe we can put that in you and do something like that.
Yep.
But then that, based off of insurance and all of that stuff, turned into be quite a challenge as well, which was a bummer.
And it is a bummer. And we, I'd love to talk more about that as we get into the kind of options that are out there for fertility and, same-sex assigned at birth couples. It's just what you want to do isn't always accessible or easy to do, so we still grapple with it a little bit because, there may be a kid number 2 coming in. You want to.
Well, let's fast forward right into that conversation. Okay. We were talking about how you fell in love. You guys got engaged. You got married. I mean, not that you have to get engaged and get married to have babies, but like, that's how you guys did things. And then, like, you're having this conversation and you've decided, like, AK is going to carry first. If you have future children, that could look, creative director over there, Steph, that could look very creative with the different things that you do. So what was step 1? Like, what was like, okay, we're ready to have a baby. What do you do?
I think what we did and what I recommend to everybody for step 1, because I'm in about 8 billion TTC groups and LGBT TTC groups and all kinds of stuff, is like, first of all, go to the doctor. Just go to your regular, whether that's your primary care or your OBGYN, or your local fertility clinic. If you want to start there, you can, and just have them run your full labs. That's what I did, especially because I was advanced maternal age already at that point. And I had also tried to get pregnant previously in a relationship in my early 30s and had run into some issues. So I was already aware of some issues that I had, low ovarian reserve. So I knew, being like 6 or 7 years later, it was going to be an uphill battle. So that's what we did. We started out with a visit to, I think,
it was in Boston.
Yeah, it was before we got married. Also, side note, it was like a few months before our wedding, and we kind of jumped right on it once we knew we were going to be together forever. We were like, well, let's just start figuring out what we need to do. So we started at that doctor and just kind of talked through the plan. So they just sit and tell you kind of basically all the approaches that you can take in terms of conception. And then, of course, there's a whole bunch of other things in the way of, like, how do we get sperm and things.
Okay. And did they run labs for you, Steph?
I can't remember.
I think we chose not to at that time.
Yeah. And we went to a doctor that was recommended from our friend, our mutual friend, that actually, one that we met through my old partner, who's like my bestie now. She also married us. And then also her and her wife have children, and we went to one of their doctors and recommended, like, LGBTQ plus friendly doctor. So that was like a nice place to go and have a very open and like nice conversation about the whole process, because I didn't know much about it at all. She was way more familiar with the whole thing than me.
I'm like certified at this point.
Yeah. So she was like the Google queen, where I didn't have very much information or understanding of the process and all of the ins and outs of that. So in like also thinking about it from a timeline point of view. So that doctor was very helpful in bringing both of us through it and talking about it. And then they brought us both aside individually, if I remember correctly, at some point to talk about it, like how we would feel about parenting in our relationship. Do you remember that?
Vaguely. I vaguely remember that.
We met with like the
social worker.
Yes,
so this is the first step where I was a little bit irritated because it's different than a heteronormative experience. And so like, once you have that whole consultation, before you decide what route you want to go, you have to meet with a social worker, and the social worker has to talk to you just about, the social worker ended up, the topics were pretty average, just like you're getting ready to be a parent. Do you understand like that you're going to have a, sperm donor and all this? But like the point being was that heterosexual couples didn't have to do it. Like if a man and a woman had gone into that office because they couldn't get pregnant, they were not going to have to meet with a social worker to move forward in the process. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why they do that still, but I've heard from a lot of people that it's pretty infuriating. That's ridiculous.
It makes me, I just can't even. I'd like, hopefully everybody listened to part 1 and part 2, right? Because this is an ongoing theme now, like, right?
Yes.
Now, no matter what state you're in, like people are so fucked up with the patriarchy that they're like, there's only heteronormative. Now, one of the questions I have is, what if Steph was a trans man? And they it's not obvious, right? A lot of trans men, they're not obviously trans men. Do you think that they would have, like, you could have just said like, hey, the other couple said azospermatic, we identified previously I'm azospermatic. Like, do you think they would make that couple go through it? No.
I think if you didn't identify, I totally think that if you would have identified her as trans, then you might have had to go through it. But if you were to go in there passing and just like you said, I have issues with sperm, and absolutely do not believe that we would have had to do it.
This is crazy to me. Okay. And then
this is Boston. This is like as far, this is pretty left. Like this isn't like Arkansas.
And it was like a weird conversation too, like trying to project like, how would you, or like have them take me in a room, ask me these questions, personal questions about myself. And then like, how are you going to feel about this in the future? And I'm like, well, I hope we've talked about it and I hope a certain outcome, but like, I don't know exactly. I don't know myself 30 years from now. And they also are asking about my mental health and these sorts of things to see if I was like mentally stable enough and to be in a lesbian relationship and blah, 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 and have a child.
They make it like very clear that it's not any kind of like, it's not a pass fail thing. It's not an evaluation, but it feels like it. That's the kind of questions they're asking. Like,
do they acknowledge to you, or do you acknowledge them? Because I would just sit in the room and be like, number one, this is super fucked up that like my sister and her husband didn't have to do this with you. Right. Like, and that we do. Like, I would be like, can we all just acknowledge that up front? Can I record this conversation? Like, did you guys do anything like that? Or were you like very compliant?
I was compliant because I was really nervous about the whole situation. Okay. And also getting into talks about my mental health. And that's a very like personal thing for me. And like, I'm open about it. Like, yes, I do have like depression. I do have anxiety. It's all in paperwork and all that sort of thing. But I felt like they were going to then use that against me. And I'm like, well, I'm pretty on top of all of those things as an individual. So like, if I do say yes, like, does this now, is it going to like DQ me from the whole thing? And then I'd feel like I wasn't like I'd be falling short on my half as a partner or something. So it was a bit, I don't know.
And it was hard. Like I will say like the lady was super nice and everything. She wasn't interrogative, if that's a word, but like, so she wasn't, you know what I mean? It didn't feel confrontational. So we didn't bring confrontation to it, but you just definitely know that it happens and it's not right. And like, I hope that people are exploring why that's happening and hopefully trying to get rid of that process. I do think, like, listen, some sort of counseling around donor conception, becoming donor conceived parents, and what the experience of donor conceived children truly is super important. But like, that's not the same thing. Like,
Right. What about single birthing persons? Like, do you think they had to do the same counseling?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I really don't know.
I don't know. We just know heteronormative couples don't have to do this.
Yeah.
So this is really important. So if you were a male, female, assigned sex couple going into this exact same clinic, and let's just say the female needed to get an egg donor or the male needed to have donated sperm, they would not have to go through this process at all.
Not to my knowledge, no. And interestingly enough, though, I will say, so this was a major hospital system in Boston. Here in North Carolina, and we just like didn't continue treatment with them. We just kind of stopped and went on with life. We decided we weren't going to start right at that point. So when we came to North Carolina and started to do it again, we did not have to do that through a clinic. So I don't know if that has to do with
North Carolina does it on the back end. Spoiler alert. We'll get to that.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
From my understanding in my interviews. But anyway,
second parent adoption.
Yeah, second parent adoption. So we'll get to that in a minute. But okay, so at that point you've made some decisions and you go through this counseling or whatever, and then you end up moving to North Carolina.
Yeah, we just decided like we're not quite ready to jump to get things going yet, and then we just went on with life.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved to North Carolina about a year and a half later.
Okay.
No. That's not what happened. So we get the timeline right, honey. So we ended. It was prior to us being married, and I was feeling like, let's just get married first, like one thing at a time. Amy has a tendency to like want to like boil the ocean, and I'm a very like step by step type of person. So I had a little freak out, and was like, let's just get married first. And then you got a really great job opportunity like 3 months later. And then we were off in North Carolina. So it kind of.
Oh, you're right. Okay. So that you're absolutely right. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So then we just had like moved down here. And once we got settled down here, then we started looking at different clinics and things and researching.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So where does that begin then? A fertility clinic, or do you establish with an obstetrician, gynecologist, midwife?
Nope. I still don't have an OBGYN in Charlotte.
Okay.
We went right to the fertility clinic.
Right to the fertility clinic. Okay. And so at this point, have you guys, well, actually, I mean, I know the answers to all these questions, but I want to ask this so that you can tell the audience listening. What types of options do you have as far as like egg, sperm, carrier, like fertility? Like, can you just outline like what are the different choices?
Yeah. So, you can, first of all, you can start with the person. You can use the person who's carrying. You can use their egg. You can, if you do that, then you can start with IUI, intrauterine insemination. Either way, you need sperm. You start there. If you're going to do that, you need sperm. So sperm, you have known donors. You can find somebody that you know. If you do that, highly recommend you get a contract, but do a lot of research into that whole thing before you go that route. So then there's donor sperm, obviously, and that is anonymous. You'll never know who that person is. They'll never know who you are. You can have open ID, which is what we chose, which is at 18, the donor has agreed to minimum one communication with the offspring. And then you can have completely open, which is just from the beginning, you know who they are and they know who you are. So those are the sperm options. And then if you want to go to IVF, then you have the choice of using either partner's egg. And of course, you still need to make the choice about donor sperm.
Okay. Is transvaginal insemination something that they offer at the fertility clinics, or is that just straight jumping straight to IUI?
The closest thing to that would be ICI, as far as I know, intracervical insemination. And I know it is a thing, but I have never had a fertility professional recommend it. They're usually starting with IUI.
Okay. The couple that I interviewed. Yeah, I was going to say the couple that I interviewed that did it, they just did it at home themselves, literally with like a turkey baster.
Yeah, I'm skipping that part. So for sure, that totally works for some people. My sister is in a same-sex relationship, and they had they conceived at home with a known donor who's still in the kid's life. So there's lots of pictures of family creation for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So you're sitting in this fertility clinic, both of you guys, and you're having this conversation about, okay, we've decided that we've done all the blood work and we've decided that Amy Kate is going to carry and we decided we're going to use Amy Kate's egg for sure. Okay. Even though we had low ovarian reserve.
Yeah, and that's a frustrating part of the process for us as well. So we would have loved to do reciprocal IVF, meaning I carry Steph's egg. But in order to do that, Steph would have to go through the process of having her eggs retrieved. And the way that the health care system is set up, the insurance care system is set up, is that they will cover IVF, but you have to prove infertility by trying to get pregnant. So Steph can't just say, well, I don't want to carry, I just want to have them, retrieve my eggs. She would have to go through a certain number of IUIs before they will cover IVF. And so she doesn't want to carry and doesn't want to risk getting pregnant. So if we wanted to do reciprocal, we would have to pay out of pocket to have her to go through all those medications and have her eggs retrieved. So we chose what we did really because we had to.
You are super ethical people, y'all, because I'm one, combative, so I would have yelled at that social worker, and two, sneaky. So I would have found a doctor that would have been like, you know what, Amy Kate, we've been trying to conceive for 18 years and it just hasn't happened. We don't know why. I would have just totally had a doctor write on paperwork that I have been trying to have sex or trying to conceive with my partner and just, I'm not pregnant, and they don't fucking need to know why. Do they know the sex of your client? Do they know the sex of your partner? No, fuck no.
Yes.
Or do you have to? I would have lied. I would have been like, partner, male. We've been trying a long time.
Yeah,
insurance.
So you could probably. I do feel. Believe me, I've given plenty of thought to that, and I think the way because outside of that, you're asking a doctor to commit insurance fraud. So if you can find someone to do it, I would love it. But it's tough to ask. So you would have to. The only thing about that is that you'd have to go through so much of that process without ever having your partner present. Because you could just go to the doctor and be like, my husband and I have been having sex for this long and I'm not getting pregnant. And sure, he's going to give you an infertility diagnosis, but that means your fake husband can't show up to appointments and be with you as your partner. Mm-hmm. And as soon as that happens, then they're like, game is up. You guys are females.
And so that's the whole point of this visibility series, right? Is trying to not have to hide behind paperwork and hide behind insurance companies and all those things. It's I would have fucking lied to save money, right? Because that's what I do. But, hopefully the more stories like this that we share and talk and people get angry and listen. And hopefully all of my listeners are listening and thinking, it's not fair. So if you know someone, if you're listening and you know someone in government, write them a letter,
major reform around queer family, planning and insurance needs to be equitable. And it is we have infertility because, as you said, we're azoospermatic. So that, and just as a hetero couple may come in and be azoospermatic for some reason, listen, we should have the same options. They don't go through IUIs. They don't have to go through 6 IUIs to prove infertility, paid out of pocket, by the way. You know what I mean? They just show up and they're like, well, he doesn't have any sperm. And they're like, well, let's get you into some IVF with some donor sperm then, or whatever, it's just, they cover it basically from the beginning. Whereas we have to jump through hoops and pay to prove that we're infertile, which we're clearly have fertility obstacles, I mean, and to be fair, some of the practitioners I've worked with have expressed that they think it's ridiculous too, so it's a known thing, but it's big business we're fighting. So,
yeah. Well, you know what? All we can do is just keep making some noise. Right.
Yeah.
And then just hope that it makes change. And in the meantime, we're creating a roadmap to help other people. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you're sitting there and you guys at some point make a decision what to do. And you said largely based on insurance also. So, and you I know you you told me already about the donor and all that kind of stuff, but can you just walk through exactly what you chose, what that looked like, and when you got started?
I feel like you started looking before me at various websites and things online.
Yeah, I kind of picked our bank and everything like that.
Yeah.
And then we just talked through as a couple what was most important to us. So that's going to be different for everybody. Some people, the education level or area of expertise for the donor is going to be the thing. For some people, ethnicity is going to be everything. For us, I think that there was tiers. And like the most important thing was that they had physically the same characteristics as Steph, because we wanted the baby to look like both of us as much as possible. So we were just trying to find Steph's like little clone in the world of donor sperm. And then we went from there. Like if he could also be, musical or creative, like that would be great. And if we could match up ethnicities and Steph's background, that would be super cool too, So that's how we approached it. And then if you've never shopped for sperm, it's just like 100% like online dating, except there's not a back and forth communication, but the profile makeup is exactly the same. So you're just scrolling through profiles of guys. Some have baby pictures, some have adults pictures if you want to pay more money, which we did. And so then you're just kind of going through weeding out, certain ones until you find the one that you want to pick.
Roughly how much does that cost to shop for sperm online dating, like you said?
Goes up every year. When we did it, it was $1,000 per vial.
Yeah.
So if you're doing IUI, that's one vial per treatment. If you're doing IVF, you can get a lot. You can use one vial for like many rounds.
And they have the different providers they run online specials, and we were trying to like when they would have like a promo code, basically try to get in there and like buy up the sperm.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are doing the exact same thing because it's so expensive, and you have to like, they have like a little ticker that ticks down in like the right-hand corner of the person's profile of like how much they have left. And like everyone like swoops in on people, especially what I had noticed, swoops in on the people that have the adult photos, which are not as many. So I feel like the ratio is like for every person with adult photos, there was like, I don't know, like 30 other people that just had baby photos. So when we were just looking particularly at those folks with the adult photos, like it would go really quick. There were people that we wanted, and they would be like gone by the time we got to them for the amount of vials that we needed at that point in time.
Gotcha. So had you guys decided like we're going to do 4 vials or something like that in case it takes 3 or 4 attempts, or if we want to have multiple? I mean, I'm starting to think like, well, what if you wanted to have 4 kids? Do you just buy up all the sperm so they have all your kids have the same donor? Like,
that's what people do. And then like for us now, we have frozen embryos. So once you get to IVF, you're in a little bit of better position to not have to purchase sperm in the future.
I would be like, can't you just reach out to him and see if he'll just give another donation?
Yeah. Well, sometimes that's a thing. I've heard that you can call the bank and they will on your behalf, like reach out to the person and explain it. But sometimes the donors have said like, I'm done. I'm done with this part of my life, so they don't, unfortunately.
What's the average age range for the donors, you think?
College.
Okay.
Most of them are college age. That's where they recruit. Like that's where the clinics recruit from. So most of these guys are really young and they're doing it for extra money. And that's another whole controversy around donor gamete donation. They call it, that it's not a donation. First of all, these guys, people are selling their gametes. They're not donating them. That's like a frothy way to frame it up. And a lot of times people are doing this in different stages of maturity where they're not quite grasping the implications down the road, of the kid.
Right. Especially when there's like 23andMe, you know what I'm saying? Like the joke is the anonymity.
Yes.
Ha ha ha. You guys did you decide to try IUI, or was there a reason to jump straight to IVF?
We have to, that's the part that's not there. You have to
try IUI. So you had to buy.
Well, in order for insurance to cover IVF, you have to go through IUI and you have to pay for that out of pocket. So in a lot of insurance companies, if you're over 35, it's 3 IUIs. And if you're under 35, it's 6.
Okay.
And I'm not like the expert by all means. I may be saying some things that are slightly off here and there, but, overall, that was the experience. And by the way, like before you even get into the things you're going to encounter in the fertility industry, like you don't even have access to that. Like to talk about accessibility and privilege, like like same-sex couples, if you don't have a whole bunch of money saved or a job with really good insurance, because a bunch of insurance companies don't cover infertility at all. But if you're lucky enough to have insurance that covers it, you're still looking at several tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket to get there. So if you don't have that, your options are very limited to like known donors and at-home insemination. And for some people, that's not what they want to do, you know? So the biggest hurdle from the gate is financial, for sure.
Oh, as you're talking, it's just like my heart just starts going. So my little baby sister, oh, she's not a baby anymore, and she's gay, and this is her journey, and she wants to carry. And part of doing this series was in honor of her and for her, because she wants to be a mom so bad. And I'm like, every question I ask, it's like I'm asking for her, like, what do we need to do? What do we need to do? You know what I mean? Like, what does this look like? You know, she's got some years ahead of her and she's not in love with anyone yet, but she knows no matter what, she wants to go down this journey of carrying, whether she meets someone or not. And so I always just, all these questions I feel like in these episodes are like for her, you know? So did you do this 3 times? Amy Kate, 3 IUIs.
Well, we got a little bit of a pass because, as I mentioned, like in a previous marriage many, many moons ago, okay, I did start the process and I had one unsuccessful IUI. So that luckily for me, they counted it. They were like, that counts no matter how long ago it was. So we had to do 2 together.
Okay,
to get access to IVF.
What role, Steph, do you play in Amy Kate's IUI? Because you're both going in to get pregnant, essentially. Like this is both of your, this is your, you know, it's ultimately Irie and your daughter, but like I'm trying to like put myself in your situation, Steph. Like it seems like it's so Amy Kate focused.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think, and we went to 2 different clinics over the course of our journey, and really, and it felt different at both clinics. The first clinic that we went to, there was this amazing woman that worked there who, I don't know, she just had that very like approachable, loving vibe that, and I think she was like cognizant of always trying to include me in the conversation, which was nice. Even just like welcoming me into the clinic in the morning sort of thing. Cause you end up going there quite often.
Mm-hmm.
And to do all the blood work and stuff. But I think my main role in the whole thing is I was just really her support person, emotional support person. I would sit there and I'd also listen to the doctor and ask questions, but mainly kind of just sit there and try to be supportive of her and what she was going through, because it was her body and her blood they were taking and doing things and all that sort of stuff. But for me, like, I think when we ended up, things weren't successful with that clinic. We ended up moving to another one. And there it definitely felt more like Amy focused. And I was just in the background, even when it came to like paying the bill, which a lot of it, like, I don't know, we both paid for, but it definitely seemed like they were more Amy focused, or they would always call her like the mother. And that really annoyed me. They would ask questions and they were always asking it to her, or even at the doctor now that happens, frankly, sometimes. And it's a little irritating because I'm like, I'm also the mother and I'm also being woken up in the middle of the night. And I'm also getting thrown up on and changing dirty diapers and all of that. So it definitely is like frustrating sometimes.
What's your parenting name on that note? What are you guys, what are your parenting names on that note? Like, do you both go by mother?
I'm Mama. And
I go by all of them. I Mama a lot and Mommy, and I mean I actually use all the names for both of us all the time, but like we're like Mama and Mama the most, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Irie will probably answer that question later about what she calls each of you guys. Yeah. Yeah.
They tend, from other couples that we know who have kids, that tends to be how it is. Like you think you know what you want to be called, but unless it's something like really different, if it's in the mom category, they're going to pick on their own, basically.
Yep.
Yeah. Did it make you feel jealous, Steph?
Not jealous per se, just more left out. Cause I feel like if it was like a heteronormative relationship, like it wouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
least that's my assumption. So I just felt more left out of the whole thing. But I just tried to be like, I think by nature, a very supportive, empathetic person.
Yeah.
So I was just trying to lean into that and be there for her as much as possible
Now,
during the process.
you had mentioned, I kind of asked that question too, because you had mentioned, you guys, at the beginning that like what you thought you wanted to do for baby 2, or, you know, if there is a baby 2, may be different than on number 1 or whatever. So I didn't know if, like, watching Amy Kate go through all of these things, was there any point where you were like, I wish I could just switch places with her or take that on? Or were you like, no, we're in the roles that are feeling good for both of us?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely times where I felt terrible that she was having to get these awful shots every day, but I definitely was like, I don't want to do that.
I think that any thoughts that Steph had about becoming pregnant and then being pregnant, like anything she dabbled with, was gone when she watched me go through getting pregnant and being pregnant.
Yeah, I feel like, the shots thing, not fun. And then when you swelled up to like double the size of whatever, I was like, that's really not fun. But I think for me, I've always kind of been of the feeling, just because of my own like gender dysphoria, that or my just nature of who I've been my whole life. I've never really identified with wanting to like have a baby inside me and be pregnant and be like waddling around and all swollen and all the things that you were. But
wanted to be a mom. But wanted to be a mom for sure.
Yeah. And then once I had Irie, that kind of switched a little bit because we had troubles with breastfeeding, and I ended up breastfeeding her in the hospital. And that like freaked my brain out, like flipped, like I was like, wow, this is actually amazing. Mm-hmm. And it was such a feminine thing to do that has almost like sent my brain for a little bit of a loop with the whole like dysphoria and feeling transgendered and all of that, which I still definitely do. But it definitely like put me back for a moment, being like, do I want to carry? Like, do I want to, like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Just maybe to take like a little bit more of a pause. That was definitely never there before.
And then since you just said all that, I just want the audience to know we talked in advance, and like, Steph, you're still identifying with pronouns she, her, which is kind of, you know, I want to make sure since we're talking about gender dysphoria and transgender thoughts and feelings and stuff, that the audience is acknowledging that we're using the terms in which feel appropriate for you, at least today, when we're doing this recording, you know?
Yeah.
So I can understand what you're saying about feeling left out. And I will say I've never been I've only been the pregnant person, but I mean, just in all fairness, they do mostly disregard the other person in the room too. Like, it's all about the pregnant person. And so I don't know if like a bunch of like dad men would say that they felt any different than the way that you were treated, but that's the difference. You're not the dad dude partner, you know, you're a mom. So anyway, and there's, you know, different things that go along with that. I just want to make sure we're saying it out loud, how you're feeling through that process. Yeah, so absolutely. 2 more failed IUIs. Those have to be devastating. Like, I'm assuming you guys were really hoping you were going to get pregnant with IUI.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't want to go through IVF. Seemed at the time like a really daunting undertaking. And of course, we were just hoping to get it done kind of as quickly and easily as possible. And it was technically 3 IUIs because we did one month, and then the next month we did 2 back to back, like a day apart, trying to just increase those chances. So but alas, they didn't work.
Yep.
On to IVF.
And now time's ticking more, right? Like, I'm just kind of doing math over here. Like, you were kind of like saying you were thinking about this at 37, and then you put on pause and you moved to North Carolina, and we've had failed IUIs. So how old are you when you become pregnant?
The first time I became pregnant, I was 38. 38. And that was our first IVF transfer, which we lost that baby very early on. And so when I conceived the second baby, I was 39.
Okay.
That would be Irie.
Yeah.
And gave birth 3 days before my 40th birthday.
How many days before?
3 days.
3 days. Okay.
Yeah.
Just got that cut off for that. Because there's a whole, when we get to the birth in just a minute, there's a whole nother set of things that come into play for being over 40. How much time was there between IUI and doing your first IVF transfer?
You had to get like all readied up on the drugs.
Yeah, I would say between from the IUI transfer, maybe 90 days or so. But we had to do a retrieval first. So we went right into that preparation for the retrieval. We probably had the retrieval within 60 days. And then, you wait the next cycle to do the transfer.
Okay.
So
with the retrieval, from what I understand, that's under general anesthesia?
Yep.
Is Steph allowed to be with you?
Yes. Well, not in the retrieval room.
Yeah.
No.
It's kind of like a operating room sort of thing. But I was with her before and after.
Yeah. Which was really great. And our clinic was amazing about that. Like, I mean, they, in terms of that, I feel like we were treated super fairly and kindly and recognized as, equally. And so they always referred to Steph as my wife, and they went and got her exactly when they should, and made sure she was right by my side when I came out, and all the way up until I had to go in and everything. And she got to stand at the, it's like the pre-nursery where you get to stand in the window and like watch the eggs being retrieved and counted. So.
Yeah. And they like high five you, like every time there's like a little ticker on the wall, and the person comes in with like the little tube, they dump it in, they'd look back and they'd be like, yeah, high five, got up to 12 or 13 or whatever it was. So we were both, they engaged me in the process, which was very nice.
Okay. That is awesome. I'm like imagining like this egg retrieval thing being fun, even though Amy Kate, you're sound asleep with anesthesia, whatever.
Yeah.
Very cool. So how many eggs did you get?
I think 12, right?
12.
That's a lot for low ovarian reserve. I mean, that's 12. 12 is a lot.
Yeah. And we ended up, so then of course the retrieval is like your biggest number, and you're excited. And then they call you every day with how your eggs are maturing, and you lose some inevitably. So I think we ended up with, did we end up with 3?
That went to 5-day blast.
Yeah. I think the first one was 3 because we had 2 that were normal.
Yep.
Right. So you go to 3 that made it to blast, and then we chose to do PGS or PGTA, a couple different terms, but the chromosomal testing on them, and 2 of them were good and 1 was abnormal. So actually after that whole process and 12 eggs, we ended up with 2 viable embryos.
Wow. And with the genetic testing, did you find out the assigned sex of the embryos?
Okay. Yes.
I did. It was a top secret that I kept from Amy. She dropped off the phone, and the nurse on the phone told me.
Okay. Because some people choose which one to transfer. Like, say you're 2, one was assigned male. I'm like, it's not assigned sex at birth. It would be assigned sex at conception, I guess. Yeah. Or assigned sex in embryo. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Sex in embryo. But if one was male and one was female, I've had some fertility clients I've worked with where they got to choose. So did one of you choose which one to implant?
So they were both female.
Yeah.
And from that,
we picked by quality. After that.
So we picked by quality.
Yeah. So then they're graded by quality. Yeah. And so then we just threw in the best one.
Did you ever think about implanting both and doing twins?
I did.
She did. And for me, that was like a hard no, like more than a hard no, like a definitely, absolutely fucking not no. Like again, with Amy wanting to do all the things at once, I like went back with us getting married and like the whole thing. I was like, can we just please do this a little bit more step by step and just start with one, see how it feels. And then,
but also she had our doctor on her side, because if you do not do chromosomal testing or genetic testing, they will implant two because the likelihood of one failing is higher. But if they are both tested normal, at least at our clinic, their policy is not to do two. They won't do it. Like and age comes in, like you can beg them if you're old enough, they might, because again, you have a higher fail rate. But the policy at the time was like, they wouldn't do it anyway. So it was a losing battle.
It's not like back in like the early 90s where the cover of the magazine was like, she had 8 babies.
Right.
Because, yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, I promised everyone a birth story. So I want to jump ahead to your birth story, but I don't want to skip ahead without honoring first. Like, I don't want to just brush over your loss. So you had 2 viable embryos.
Yes.
You implanted.
And so, our first transfer was successful, and we got like a positive pregnancy test. We were so excited. So there was like a good 3 weeks there that we were really thrilled. And then when we went in for our first ultrasound, there was an empty gestational sac. So it was a blighted ovum. Okay. So that was really tough.
Yeah, that was a big like punch to the gut emotionally for both of us. And you still did not know what the, assigned sex was like at conception or whatever. And so I told her after that.
Yeah, that's when I wanted to know. It was just part of my like grief process. I just wanted to know. Yeah. So then subsequently I knew what the next one would be because I knew they were the same. But so then we just we didn't take very long. I did want to keep moving forward just because of age and everything. And so we just grieved real hard and kept going. Mm-hmm. And then we got Iuis.
Yep.
So Iuis was the last embryo from this sperm, right? Do you have more vials of sperm from the same donor?
They saved half of our original vial, so they didn't need it all to get those. And so because they're only using, once you get your eggs, they're just putting 1 sperm in at a time. So they know they don't need it all. So they saved it. And so while I was actually healing, I had to have a D&C for my first loss. So while I was healing for 1 cycle, they actually, I don't know how it worked. It's something like that. But I did a retrieval in the middle before I transferred again. We did another retrieval just in case. So surprise, we have 4 more embryos right now.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is so amazing. Okay, well, let's skip ahead. I mean, I know I could go on and on for thousands more questions, but I think I've got a pretty good picture of your journey, and I don't want to leave the audience or me without this birth story. Thank you for being part of the Birth Story family and listening to this episode. On Tuesdays every week are doula diaries, little snippets and tidbits from my week, along with some teaching and education. And then on Thursdays, we meet here for our birth stories and our expert speakers. So thank you for being here and listening to the podcast twice a week. And if you are left wanting more, like Heidi, I've listened to all the episodes, I've read your entire book, then I hope you will meet me in Birth Story Academy and let me be your online childbirth educator to prepare you for your hospital birth, no matter what that looks like. Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will feel empowered by the end of your pregnancy to speak up, plan, and